focus on what it is that we as a village can do to uplift our men. Our people are under attack. We have a war being waged against us. And our men are at the front lines. Between the two of the complementary forces that we have that create us as a people, the men are under, I believe, a harsher attack than the women are. And so what can we do as a people? What can we do as the complementary force to circumvent this situation? What can we do to at least acknowledge it when we see our men being attacked so that we can help them to continue?
Well, the number one thing that I think about lately is, as much as possible, at least 80 to 90% of the time, to handle disagreements and disputes inside the community instead of going outward. I think a lot of the conflicts and things that happen, we are having disputes pour out outside of our communities. And then we have people who get involved who are intent on destroying us. In the time that we're living now, we shouldn't be having any great disputes, just small disputes, small disagreements. But any dispute, large or small, or disagreement should be held internally, should be dealt with internally. And this goes back to what Shaba Kojo said, a community set of rules, a community set of laws that we all abide by. And within those laws, we should have systems to deal with disagreements, disputes.
The latest iteration of the attack on the Al-Kebalan family, on the Black family, on the African and African-American family, is still the attack that we were under. And again, latest sustained attack is going to be the attack that was left during the Nixon administration, where his chief of staff, Haldeman, admits that to Nixon, the number one problem in America were, or is to him, the Blacks. And they needed to create a system that acknowledged that to be true without having that in any written or governmental form as evidence that that's what was being done. And out of that, some of the relief that we needed was dismantled, and some systems were put into place to, again, disrupt for an nth time the African family structure. And what he began to unfold during his administration were the frameworks for the war on drugs. Everything that the European decides that he is going to build or destroy is framed around the concept of war, because they understand in order to survive in their paradigm, it needs to be a sustained war effort. And some very serious things came out of the war on drugs and subsequent policies that followed the war on drugs, including the war on poverty and No Child Left Behind, which is basically the war on failing school systems. But I won't go that far. I'll go right back to the Nixon administration, where even prior to the Nixon administration, it was determined by a report that the number one problem that African and Al-Kebalan and African-American families had in this country was the lack of opportunity and upward mobility to take care of ourselves economically, and being self-sustained economic units, that we could feel as though our time was being spent effectively and we were being rewarded or compensated fairly for our labors in a form that would allow us to be forward-moving economically, allow us to lift ourselves up by those bootstraps that they took away from us, along with the boots and some of our toes as well. I would say that's the latest sustained effort as to what we need to look to reverse primarily. So some things came out of that, including the separation or further separation of families by legal systems, including the court, including the welfare system, including the public assistance sector, including the family court structure, including the child support structure. The family court structure is really something that is anything but a family court structure. It's a family authorized legal destruction of the family structure is really what the courts are playing out to be in our relationships. And Loon, you said something earlier pertaining to the sustained war efforts, the African man versus the African woman. And I speak in verses because we're speaking about war. I don't think that the warfare is any less sustained on the feminine side of our people. I believe it's a different kind of war, and it's a psychological war, more so on the side of women, and the psychological warfare that the Black woman is under at this present time is that she has no need for the Black man. And that's going to drive her in a certain area of psychosis and a certain area of behavior towards and against the Black man. And it's going to play out the way it's playing out now. If there is no need for the Black man, then she, in her behavior that she believes is acceptable based on the warfare, the psychological warfare that she is under, she's going to behave and treat the Black man in a certain way. And that's going to continue the successful war effort of the Europeans that have put that system into place. The male side of what we're experiencing as a result of the warfare is partly we don't need the Black woman, but then we're also getting an additional level of physicality, not so much.
And that's what I was speaking on.
Okay, so they're both as effective and destructive. One is more viscerally violent and apparent that you can view, but the other is more sinister.
And just as destructive.
And possibly more destructive, because it's not destroying an immediate Black body, but it's destroying the future of Black bodies, the creation of such. And if you can stop or prevent something from being created, that is much more effective a war strategy than to destroy something that is already there. So I'm not going to say that the woman is under any less of an assault. She's under a different kind of assault, which is the primary aim, right? The art of fighting without fighting. That is the pinnacle of effective warfare. When you can stop the creation of your enemy, that is where we are in our stage of warfare. And if we're not thinking on that level, if we're thinking, well, the males are under a certain level of incarceration, a certain level of physical violence, well, if the woman decides to stop creating us, then that's going to be a moot point. Then eventually what's going to happen is Black males aren't under assault anymore. Why? Because their numbers are now under such levels of high control. That's no longer an argument.
Mama Makeda, can you speak to, as your experience as a psychiatric nurse, the mind of a Kebalan male who is a father or who maybe not be a father, kind of the turmoil or the things that they are going through in terms of an assault on their psyche?
That's a loaded question, and that's a whole topic of discussion right there. The system has always been in the process of emasculating the Black male, criminalizing the Black male, vilifying him, dehumanizing him, and no less to the Black female, no less to her. But we're talking about the Black male per se right now. And the system has always sought to make him less than, to make him feel less than, and to set him up for failure by telling him, if you do these things, go to school, get the good grades, do this, get a good job, the American dream is yours. You can achieve this. And how many Black people through the course of the years have I seen admitted to psych units or outpatient psych who actually thought that if I follow the rules, then A, B, and C will follow. I will be a good citizen and I will reap the benefits and the rewards of the American dream. I have worked and I have seen Black men who have been admitted to psych units because they felt something was wrong with them, who didn't understand that there was an invisible system called Ronald Wesley Stanford at work, at play, manipulating every move that they make in order to ensure that that Black male would fall into the trap that has been preset for him in order to fail and make it look like what's wrong with me. I did this and I did that and I did that. I can't seem to get ahead. It's kind of like with my grandfather, who was that sharecropper. And no matter how hard he worked and how hard my grandmother worked and the children who were growing up, no matter how hard they worked on that sharecropping land, we never got out of debt. They never got out of debt because the system is not designed for us to get out of debt. It's not designed for us to advance. There are a few of us who do fall through the cracks, because we have to, those few who fall through the cracks have to be held up as examples to those who are stuck at the bottom of the barrel, to those who are still trying to get there. Those few have to be held up as examples of, see, so-and-so did it, so-and-so made it. They worked it, they worked the system, and not understanding that there really is a Ronald Wesley Stanford in place, who every time you have a dream or a goal or an aspiration, there's already a construct in place to deconstruct that, to take that away. Years ago, in the late 1890s, this doctor from South Carolina, a white doctor out of South Carolina, he said the way you subdue an African village is you go in with all of your weaponry, and the first thing you do is you kill off 90% of the men. The other 10% of the men will submit, will bow down to you. However, that leaves all 100% of the females of your women unprotected, vulnerable, exposed, at risk, and at the will and the mercy of the invaders. So the attack is coming at us from all sides. We don't have anywhere to breathe, no breathing room, because if I go here, they're there. If I go turn, the invader is there everywhere I go. But for the masculine aspect, and we've already identified him as the provider, the protector, the nurturer, the all of these things that he's supposed to do, when his hands are tied behind his back and his tongue is cut out and his head is chopped off, and he's set up as an example unto the other males. This is what will happen to you. This is what we will do to you. Then you have effectively traumatized psychologically, emotionally, socially, all these other ways. You have effectively, literally deactivated the testosterone in him, because we know what the invader will do to us. And the left behind women and children have that same trauma, because you not only have taken away our protection, but any babies that I may have in the future, I know what you're going to do to them. So everywhere we turn, this war is there. And we've only recently begun to call it a war, because we have not understood that it actually is war. They've been fighting the war. We haven't. We haven't, because we have not identified it as that. And therefore, we have not been equipped to counter it, as Dr. Francis said.
Thank you so much, Mama Makeda, because I was holding my tongue because I feel like I was misunderstood in the way that I stated my last comment. And this is something that actually Shaba Kojo has taught me, that exactly what you said, the men have to be taken down first, and then thereafter, the nation is yours. So I feel like that there is a particular focus on our men that we need to address so that we can be functional, so that we can continue to exist.
I feel like this conversation is like we bit off more than we could chew, because it's really been all over the place.
It has been. And you know what? It just speaks to who we are, because initially, I wanted to focus on fatherhood, babahood. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, we are of the understanding in this conversation that we can't have one without the other. So as I try to direct it on men and men and men, we have to speak about the condition of their counterparts in order to address any issue that we may want to address for our men. Mm-hmm. So thank you for making that very, very evident.
Very evident and very unusable. Very unusable in this edit.
But wait, it's a problem that's all over the place. So of course it deserves a conversation that's all over the place.
Absolutely. So I'm not saying that what we did was wrong.
Me neither.
What we did was very right. What I'm saying is we just recorded a whole bunch of information that we're probably not going to include in the episode. So let's see if we can refocus, which is what the men are supposed to do. Prime example, right?
Enforcer.
So we're supposed to reinforce what you said you wanted us to do. So now that we understand what you want for an episode.
You always did understand, but go ahead.
Okay. So we went all around. Let's try to get to the subject here. So what is the question?
What can we do as a community to help our Kebalan men be, number one, fathers, but help protect them or help them from, knowing the system that's are in place against them? What can we do as a community?
We can redefine for ourselves, using our own historical information and examples of what it means to be a father. And that definition needs to be agreed upon and distributed not only to the men, but to the women. And the women need to show evidence that this is actually what they are asking us to be as Al-Kebalan men. And the men and the women need to sit down and come up with ways of measuring whether we are living up to that standard or not. And again, that standard needs to be based on something that is identifiably different than what is currently in place. And then systems of rewards and consequences need to be drafted up by both the masculine and the feminine energy, and a way of accounting to make sure that we are adhering to and properly being either rewarded or punished based on the standards that we set for each other. So we need to move away from other methods of engaging in a relationship that we received from outside of our culture. And we need to redefine for ourselves based on historical evidence and how we got to the level that we were prior to our invasion and say, okay, this is what we're going to agree to. I believe that the only fitting platform that can widely disseminate that information quickly is going to be the platform that we use to disseminate information quickly everywhere else. It's going to be a grassroots, socially constructed concept that we agree upon between us, and we're going to need that conversation to be as broad and wide as possible. That's where I currently am. So it has to start with the conversation first, as women decide what they want us to be doing, men deciding what we speculate, coming together, seeing what that looks like, right? And maybe this could be the start of that conversation. I can't discount that having it just clearly said we need to have a discussion. The women need to start agreeing what they want to see from us, either doing better or stop doing. The men need to agree what we speculate we're doing right and wrong. We bring that conversation together. We create some kind of code, a behavioral code, systems of rewards and consequences, and then we move forward and try to adhere to those standards. We can create those standards for ourselves.
Mama Makeda, what would you say our men should stop doing? What prevalent behavior that is not constructive have you observed that you can throw out there as example that we can use and take away?
For us to stop seeing each other through the eyes of the system and how it sees us, because the system sees us and defines us and therefore defiles us. And we tend to follow in the footsteps of the system, and we see each other through those same systemic eyes. Another thing is what I've noticed in the younger people, and me being 65, I can say, or almost 65, I can say the younger people now, in that what I'm seeing here in town and what I'm seeing portrayed on programs such as divorce court and paternity court is that our younger crowd has reduced, or they have reduced each other to sexual parts, genitalia. And that's how I relate to you. That's how I see you. I don't see your intelligence. I don't see your humanity. I don't see who you are potentially. I don't see your energy. I just see you as a body part, as a sexual part. And I'm calling that a relationship. And it's not. And to also to understand, for us to understand that previously, talking about whether the masculine and feminine aspect are getting along or not, previously, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, the family stayed together for the purpose of safety. It stayed together for the purpose of economics. It stayed together because it was a necessity to stay together. But the attack on the family has ramped up and revved up as what was the movie? One of them, I can't call the name of it, but where Lyndon Johnson, when he was president, and I think it was his chief of staff, was saying that the best way to go after the Negro is to bust up the family. And so the attack on the family meant an attack on the male, the female, the mother, the father, and the children. And and by attacking the family, it caused the roles of each to become blurred and the roles to change. And so many sisters, because we're the ones who have the children, and 9 times out of 10, we're the ones who are going to keep the kids when the family breaks up. Sisters, out of anger towards the mate, plus all of this other stuff I don't understand that's coming at me from the system that's in me that I don't understand, sisters out of anger and have directed that anger towards the mate, towards the father, and even at the children if necessary, in order to appease her feelings about what has happened. So we have to understand that we've got to stop seeing each other through the eyes of the system, and we have to stop defining and defiling each other because we're seeing each other through the system and what the system has done to us. And I say this often about, we have to know what our correct and true cultural energy matrix is and make a concerted and honest effort to return to that in order to save ourselves and to save our children. So that we've got to stop producing children just because somebody's genitalia, boom, got together and created life that neither of us wanted, neither of us want to take care of. But we've got to be responsible with our behavior. We have to be accountable with our behavior. And I can't just see you. Can I say the word penis and vagina on this program? Okay. I see. Sisters have got to see brothers more than a penis walking around, and the brothers got to see the sisters more than a vagina walking around just waiting for me to come up in there. But we have to see each other as the human beings that we are. We have to see each other as children of the ancestors. We have to see each other for the potential that we are, and step outside of the system of Ronald Wesley Stanford and begin to reclaim our rightful roles at each other. And then we can begin to see each other in the true light that we are, or in the true nature that we are, versus seeing each other the way the system sees us.
Just particularly, we're just focusing on fathers and Kebalan fathers, to add more grace and kindness and patience in dealing with fathers, given the psychological warfare that we both are under, but particularly since we're focusing on the father, what he is under. I've seen in my own life experience and in the popular zeitgeist, where the father and the male is not treated with a lot of grace and kindness internally within the community, and tenderness. I think that needs to happen more. I don't think males see that enough right now, and I think they need it now more than ever. So I would just add that.
I think that this was a great conversation. Mama Makeda, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing with us your walk, your professional contribution as well as your personal. We really appreciate it as part of this conversation.
Another URL is the kujenga.fm. That's KUJENGA.fm. like your radio dial or frequency. We can always have conversations on our Facebook page. That's Kujenga Podcast. So that's facebook.com/Kujenga Podcast. Please subscribe to our Kujenga Podcast YouTube channel. We're on all podcast channels. That's Spotify, Player.fm. We are on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. And we are on Google Play. Any emails you wish to send to us, that's going to be info@kujenga.fm. I think that's all the plugs.
I think so.
Follow the conversation, start the conversation, join our mailing list. So when you see an email from us, or you can go to our Shule website and head over into the contact area and sign up for our newsletter or our email, and we'll add you to the Kujenga Podcast. We want to thank Mama Makeda for spending some time with us. The conversation went far left, far right, but I think we have enough to edit out the center.
Thank you for having me.